Hello and welcome to Hindsighting, where we discuss all the movies to win the Best Picture Oscar and try to figure out if this picture truly is the best, or is time rendered a different verdict. I'm Edward Clow. My guest today is a producer and editor and one of the founders of Raconteur, the Miami-based Emmy and Peabody award-winning documentary filmmakers behind the Cocaine Cowboy films, and most recently Men of War, currently streaming on Apple TV, and Cancel, the Paula Deen story, which just premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. David Cypkin, welcome back to Hindsighting.
Thank you. How are you doing, Ed?
I'm doing good. This episode is a part of our new mini-series, 1981ers, where we examine a single movie from 1981. And today we're looking at Blake Edwards' Hollywood satire, S.O.B., which received 0 Oscars from 0 Oscar nominations. So why 1981? Now, I think you're in a possibly unique position to appreciate this. You and I grew up going to the same video store, Video Pursuit, which has been gone almost 30 years. And when I was a kid walking around that video store and just, looking at that box looked cool, that box looked cool. Every time I flipped a box around to see what year a movie came out, I felt like it was always 1981. Like every movie I looked at, it just seemed like every movie that I liked was from 1981. And by my current count, there are 19 movies in 1981 that I think are great, and only 2 of them received major awards consideration, Reds and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Those are the only 2 that got nominated for Best Picture. The other 19, there might be a scant acting nomination here or there, but as far as like Best Picture, only 2 of them were nominated for Best Picture, and none of them won Best Picture. So there's a debate. There continues to be debate about whether we need more than 5 nominees per year. I think in 1981, we could easily nominate more than 5 movies for Best Picture and not be stretching. But what are your thoughts on 1981 specifically?
Yeah, there's a whole slew of movies in 1981. I mean, there's Excalibur is 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Escape from New York, Caps.
Yeah.
I think Clash of the Titans was 1981. American Werewolf in London, Wolfen. So there's like some sci-fi and horror and stuff like that. Everybody talks about 1982. As like the year of sci-fi and horror. There's a lot of it. It's just an early 80s thing, I think. I
mean, yeah, in general, I think the 80s is an incredible decade. And I think what's so incredible about it is that there are all these great movies, almost all of which are coming from major studios, and there's movies for kids, there's movies for grown-ups. Yeah. I think that the 80s is a little bit dismissed, because it's not, it comes after the 70s, which of course is watershed. And, in the 90s, we have independent film, crossing over to the mainstream, and it's such a frugal time. But I think the 80s is really special. And a lot of it's nostalgia because, we were kids in the 80s. But I think if I were 20 years old now and just doing what 20-year-olds do and just going and pulling movies out of the hat, I think I would still come to the conclusion of, wow, the 80s were incredible, but something was really in the air in 1981. And, that's why I kind of wanted to do this series, because there's just, I wonder if it's the best movie year ever, only because there's just so many great movies. And again, not all these movies are on the level of like The Godfather or Jaws, but there's just so many like entertaining to watershed movies. It's the sliding scale.
Yeah, Raiders. Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it's early Spielberg. I guess at the time, I don't think early Spielberg really got his the credit where credit was due at the time. Right. I think now everybody talks about Jaws. I think it was seen mainly as a summer blockbuster.
Right.
At the time, and now now there's books about analyzing the film and everything, but Raiders is up there. It's Raiders is just it's a damn near perfect movie. And
Raiders. It's the highest grossing movie of this year, and it's nominated for a ton of Oscars, and it wins, I think, as many Oscars as Chariots of Fire. They're just below the line. You know, it wins editing, it wins visual effects. I think it wins 2 Oscars for sound. You know, so Raiders, I agree with everything that you're saying about it. I think even 2-3 years later, Raiders wouldn't be nominated for Best Picture, though. I think that's what's interesting about it, is that it's sort of the last time that, because I think there's a real stuffiness in the 80s Oscars, with exceptions, and I haven't seen...
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that Raiders was nominated.
Yeah, and Spielberg's nominated for director. Its screenplay's not nominated, so that's a bit of a dig there. Lawrence Kasdan's great screenplay for that movie is not nominated. Yeah. So that's a little bit of a fuck you. But let's talk about S.O.B, because this is a special movie to you and me, and I want to talk about S.O.B specifically, but first let's do a few stats. This movie grossed $14 million. This was not a hit. I tried to find out where it ranked. You know, obviously money meant a different thing back then. So $14 million might not be as big a bomb in 1981 that isn't it. But this movie was not successful, I know. This movie was based on basically Blake Edwards dealing with the box office failure of a movie called Darling Lily, which also was a lavish musical starring his wife, Julie Andrews. We're going to get more into that in a few minutes. This is the last movie that William Holden was in. He died right after the movie came out. He was only 63. Here's something I didn't know that I thought was hilarious. Orion had backed out of financing this movie, so the funeral home at the end of the movie is called Orion's, which I never noticed before. This movie was nominated for 2 Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Director and Worst Screenplay, but failed to win either. That's obnoxious. But ironically, it was also nominated for the Best Comedy Award by the WGA. And this movie was nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture, Comedy, or Musical. So I don't know if that's history making to have the same movie nominated for Razzies and Golden Globes. I mean, that's like, that kind of in a weird way encapsulates how this movie was both received and misunderstood, and we're going to get into all of that. So this I never knew. I never knew Shelley Winter's name in this movie. I don't know if, did you ever know her character's name? I don't feel like it's ever said, or I missed it.
I don't remember if I did. You know,
I don't think
now. You know, I'm revisiting it, and
I don't remember her name.
I mean, I certainly didn't remember what her name was.
So I watched it a couple days ago. So her name is Eva Braun, and that's presumably a pun on Hitler's mistress, Eva Braun. But this part I did know. She's very much modeled on a legendary agent named Sue Mangers. And if you've seen pictures of Sue Mangers, she's dressed exactly like Shelley Winters, like with the feather boas and like the long dresses and the thick sunglasses, and she actually even looked kind of superficially like Shelley Winters anyway. So it's really great casting. Yeah, let's get into this movie. So I want to give just a kind of some context. So I didn't know this when I saw it, and I've learned subsequently. So the opening of this movie is this musical number from, you know, the fictional movie Night Wind. And it's Julie Andrews running around a soundstage singing. And like I said a minute ago, this is based on a movie called Darling Lily, which was a really lavish production that Blake Edwards directed and that Julie Andrews was in. And it was like a paint your wagon size flop. It was really expensive. It was really out of control. It was just a year later, 1970, and it bombed. And I saw an interview years ago with Julie Andrews talking about how the early 70s was a really tough time in their marriage because Blake Edwards was very, very depressed. And I don't know if he attempted suicide. He was very openly in analysis. In fact, he writes a movie with his psychiatrist, a movie called That's Life with Jack Lemmon and Julie Andrews, which is actually a very good movie, a very small movie. They shot it in their house in Malibu, but I digress. But Blake Edwards is in, you know, he still makes movies, but he's making things, not even necessarily even comedies. Like he makes a spy thriller and he makes a Western, and he's making these movies that just aren't working, and he's really depressed. And Peter Sellers is in a similar spot in the early 70s where he's making things that don't work. And these two guys hated each other. And then they come back together to do Return of the Pink Panther, which is a smash hit. And Blake Edwards said that, you know, we kept coming together out of greed. because they kept offering us more and more money. And so we kept working together. And the culmination is at the end of this decade, Blake Edwards makes 10, which is a personal movie for him. And it's a huge hit. And Peter Sellers does Being There, which is a personal movie for him. And that's a good size hit. Sellers sadly dies in 1980. But Blake Edwards, when he gets to S.O.B., is kind of at like a peak point of his career because he's been doing these Pink Panther movies and he does a personal movie, 10, which is a huge hit. And he's kind of at a point where he can do whatever he wants. So it's curious to me that he makes this very bitter movie about how bad things used to be.
I guess he had to get it out, even though it was, 10 years, sitting for 10 years.
Yeah.
And percolating.
Yeah. And
he just had to get rid of it. But, look, I mean, that's what, same with 10. I guess 10 is exercising personal demons. Skin Deep is, there's, you have all these semi-autobiographical movies for one reason or another.
Yeah.
It's the most specific and the most biting thing that he ever did. He's got a list he's got a list of marks that he has to hit.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Richard Mulligan, it's interesting that he makes himself a producer. It's like he kind of splits himself in two because Richard Mulligan is playing a producer and William Holden is a director. And
that always confused me a little bit. You'd think, I don't know. You just kind of I always thought of him as the director of the, and it's like, no, William Holden is the director.
But it seems like that the character of Felix, who Richard Mulligan plays, is like sort of an uber producer, like on the level of like a Jerry Bruckheimer, or I don't mean this literally, but in terms of like a producer it seems like he has, because he's the one who sort of publicly takes the flogging for Night Wind bombing. So I know Bruckheimer's not exactly a current reference, even though he's still walking, but, I don't know who a current, I can't even say Jason Blum because he makes such small movies. So Jason Blum would never get himself in this mess. But what's interesting is that Richard Mulligan looks a lot like Blake Edwards, like down to his haircut and,
that's true.
Just superficially again. But you haven't.
You normally, you think of the director in the crosshairs, for something like this, and it just seems, I don't know, that always struck me as odd. It's like that. That everybody, I get it. Like it was his, it was his child, it was his baby and everything. But but usually, I think directors getting it.
Yeah, and because it's so interesting that this movie comes out, and I don't think there's any way he could have known this, but this movie comes out, right after Heaven's Gate, and obviously Heaven's Gate wasn't on its mind, but it does feel a little bit like Heaven's Gate in that he's like, oh, we're gonna redo the movie. Now Heaven's Gate, they recut it. This is like we're gonna remake the movie and put it out at the same time. But I think it's sort of serendipitous that it feels like.
What's also kind of interesting about that is that Heaven's Gate was like the next era of out of control, Hollywood production. He was basically, commenting on Darling Lily, which was 10 years earlier, which was like the 1970, the tail end of these bloated musicals and everything,
right?
That were starting to fail and audiences just had enough of, and we're ready for the 70s auteurs and everything,
right?
And that's what Heaven's Gate is. It's the 70s auteur, out of control, just like Darling Lily was the musical out of the 50s and 60s musical out of control.
Yeah, the handoff happens again, and it's so interesting that it kind of happens. I mean, Darling Lily isn't even necessarily a famous flop. It's kind of obscure, but I know it cost a lot of money, and I know it lost a lot of money, but it's not. No one's ever written a book about it. It's never said in the same breath as an Ishtar, a Geely, a Postman, whatever those list of flops are. And I mean, there's more than that, of course. And Heaven's Gate being still, you and I wrote a script about Heaven's Gate, but the making of Heaven's Gate, Heaven's Gate is probably still the most infamous because it sank an entire studio. Whereas those other movies, those studios, well, at least until recently, were all fine. But yeah, so I think it's just serendipitous that like, it feels a lot like the Heaven's Gate thing, but for the studio going down in flames. Like, it's not quite that cataclysmic, because I don't think anybody could have predicted that was going to happen. But yeah, I love, there's just some details that I never really noticed before. I love, the first time we see Felix, and he's got like he's got the newspapers, and he's like he's suicidally depressed. But I love how the story about Nightwind bombing, it's on the front page of Variety as it would be, but it's also like in the New York Times. So like it's national news, which again made me think of Heaven's Gate, because Heaven's Gate bombing wasn't just a story in the trades, it was national news. Like Tom Brokaw and like all these other people were like going on the nightly news and talking about, that's how interesting. So I feel like this is that, where it's like, that's how badly Felix fucked up, is that it's national news. The running gag in this movie, I think, is really interesting. The guy drops dead on the beach right in the beginning, and how no one gives a shit. How like the cops are on the beach for this guy's car rolling in, and and people are on the beach and they just don't notice him. And that's obviously very intentional about how, people in this town just don't notice shit. They don't notice this poor guy. And what's crazy is that like the guy's clutching his chest in the beginning, there's a chance someone could have saved him. like he doesn't die. I remember him dying right away, but like you see him clutching his chest, and then it pans over to the beach house, and obviously Felix is in no condition to see him, but no one on the beach sees him. I mean, I don't know what time of day it is, but I just love how he keeps visually revealing how there's ample opportunity for this guy's body to be discovered, and it doesn't happen until halfway through. It's pretty savage, and it kind of sets the tone for this. So I guess that's the first body we see. Maybe we should keep account. That's one.
Yeah, well, and at what point does Felix have his epiphany? It's like almost halfway. I mean, like it's like I don't know, 50 minutes into the movie.
It's so like, yeah. It's hard because that party goes on and on. I wonder if Paul Thomas Anderson saw this, and there's that party in Boogie Nights that goes on for like 45 minutes, because 10 has a lot of this too, but we're seeing it from the outside. Like Dudley Moore's neighbor is always having like these parties, and he's watching through his telescope. But like here we're inside it, and we're jumping around in different characters. And it did remind me, or rather I feel like PTA had to have seen this as a young kid and been like, ooh, and he grew up in Los Angeles also. But yeah, like I feel like that party, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely the end of the first act. I mean, because he doesn't even say anything for the first, yeah, it's at least 45 minutes. Maybe it's even close to an hour. I mean, this movie's not very long. It's only about 2 hours.
The structure of this movie is absolutely bizarre.
So bizarre.
I mean,
it's so bizarre.
I think there's like 25 minutes of the movie left after Felix dies.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like this movie really is a true ensemble, and I think by design. I mean, because you're jumping around a lot, and I think it's effective that way because you're seeing all these different people, and I think that could be sort of deadly for a comedy, but because this cast is so strong, and well, let me ask you this. Maybe this is something we should do toward the end, but let's just do it now because there's no structure here. I'll tell you where this ranks for me in Blake Edwards' oeuvre later. I could say this is not the best Blake Edwards movie, but I really think of this as like almost a quintessential Blake Edwards movie, because I feel like, again, I'm not saying it's the best one. I'll reveal what the best one is maybe at the end of the show, and we can kind of talk about that, or the best few if you want. You don't have to have like a list ready, but when I think of Blake Edwards, I really do think of S.O.B, and I think like it's all here because it's L.A., it's Malibu, it's like It's like physical comedy. It's like really savage dialogue. It's nudity. It's sex. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's like those things are in his other movies too.
Not to mention it's so autobiographical.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, this movie is indulgent, but I'm not using that as a bad word. But I think a lot of people dismiss this as indulgent, and I don't agree, but I do get it. I mean, that's definitely a fair criticism of this. It's just like, oh, well, this is just this guy pissing and moaning about his lot in life, and who gives a fuck about this rich guy who's married to Julie Andrews. And I'm like, yeah, that's a reasonable response to this movie, but I just always loved this movie. I know you have. I mean, that's why we're talking about it. I just think this movie, and I think like all these movies, my viewpoint on it has changed, because the first time I saw this movie, I was maybe 12, 13, 14, however old I was. So to me, it was like Hollywood was this mythological place where I was sure all this stuff happened. And it may very well happen. You know, maybe that may be true. I mean, he's not basing this off nothing.
Everything in this like reeks of like inside joke or inside information.
Oh, yeah. But that could be so off-putting, like something like.
Well, sure, it's a double-edged. You know, I mean, that works for it and against it. It's why people love this movie and hate this movie. It's like
because it isn't like because it isn't
inside joke and you're not in on it. It's
right.
Like you're like, what the hell am I watching?
Exactly, because it's not something like, you know, like The Player is definitely a movie about Hollywood, but the root of The Player is something that's more relatable. The root of The Player is a guy who's afraid he's going to lose his job. Like Griffin Mill's relatable, even though he's a prick. You can relate to him because everybody knows what it's like to feel like, oh, I'm going to lose my job because this new guy's coming in.
There's a story and a plot. You know,
yes.
This movie doesn't have a plot.
Yeah.
This movie,
right.
This is not a plot. To turn Darling Lily into a porno is not a plot.
Yeah.
Like that's not a good idea.
Yeah, and
it doesn't make any sense when it happens in the movie.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's just like, you know, you're just like, okay, whatever, go with it. Like you're already like adrift in this movie, like where you have no idea what's happening or where it's going. It's like, all right, let's just go with it.
Yeah, and I do go with it, but I wonder. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if anybody who's gonna listen, who's gonna maybe watch this movie before listening to this episode. I talked to a guest who didn't even know this movie. I recorded an episode last night. It might be the previous episode, and my guest didn't even know this movie. And I said, "Oh, you should check it out. I'm really curious what you're gonna think." And without knowing if he'd like it or not, but I think like this movie is really kind of insane, but it's so sure-footed. It doesn't feel insane because he doesn't know what he wants to do. Like, this is the movie he set out to make, and I think that's what's so fascinating about it. It's like, that's why I feel like in some ways, again, I'm not saying it's his best movie. I'll reveal that at the end, but I do feel like this is, it's like, you know how, like, for me, Body Double is not the best Brian De Palma movie, but it is the quintessential Brian De Palma movie in terms of like, that's Brian De Palma. It's all in that movie. He's made much better movies, but Body Double is like what you would show someone if you want to show someone like, what's Brian De Palma? And I feel like that's S.O.B. for Blake Edwards. It's like, who was this guy? I'm like, watch S.O.B. It's all there. He may do it better here and there, but I feel like, because I do think this movie has. It's interesting because there are moments in this movie that, as crazy as this fucking movie is, I do feel like there are moments in this movie that have pathos, that are realistic. You know, I feel like, obviously this movie, if it's known for anything, it's that there's a topless scene with Julie Andrews, which is obviously a plot point of the movie. And Julie Andrews, it's very autobiographical for her. I can't imagine what the conversation was like when he like slid the script across the dining room table and he said, "Here, sweetie, this is what we're going to do next." You know, like I feel like this scene where Richard Mulligan is like naming all the actresses who've gone topless in movies. I feel like that's had to be the conversation that Blake Edwards had with Julie Andrews, you know, or maybe not. I obviously don't know the lady, but
and then there's one of I think one of the best lines in the film from Shelley Winters.
Oh, yeah. I'll let you do it.
Would you consider getting raped or whatever the hell it is Felix wants you to do?
Yeah, that's that line. It's so outrageous. Yeah, that's one of my...
and just very Hollywood. You know?
It's very Hollywood because it's just like whatever the hell it is he wants you to do. Yeah, that is one of the funniest lines.
Ethically bankrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he makes that point again and again, and that's obviously like... Yeah, I mean, obviously he's making the point that everybody in this town is ethically bankrupt, which everything from like the player to Entourage to the big knife in the 50s. I mean, that's low hanging fruit, but I think he does it in a way that's very funny. And I think Shelley Winters is great in this. She's not even in a lot of it, but again, I appreciate it so much more because now that I know that she's modeled on a very famous agent who was, like the famous agent of her day. Like she represented like, total A-listers, like the biggest stars of that time. And, Robert Evans talked about her a lot, I think in his book, or maybe just anecdotally. Yeah, I mean, she's great. And again, not even in that much of it. I mean, this cast is so ridiculous. And, I want to talk about my favorite character in the movie, and I think I'm speaking for both of us, but I'll speak for myself, which is Robert Preston, who plays Dr. Feingarten. I didn't know who this guy was. I know that I learned subsequently, I think from my mother, that he was the original Music Man on Broadway. However many years prior to that this was, 20, 30 years. I don't even know when Music Man was. I know it was a long time ago. But right when he like walks into this movie, he fucking owns every scene he's in. And I did not know who this guy was. I know he's in Victor Victoria, which I think is the very next Blake Edwards movie. And the whole cast is great, but Robert Preston has just, every line he says is just fantastically well written. And is he your favorite character too? Or am I speaking just for myself?
Yeah, I
think it's safe to say he's kind of by design.
Yeah, he's like the comic. I mean, in a comedy, everybody's funny, but he is just like because he's so detached, at least till the end. And we'll talk about the end when we get there. But like, he is just so detached from everything and so unaffected by everything that's going on. Because I guess technically, because he's not in the industry, he's a doctor, but obviously he's a Hollywood doctor. But I love how he's a high functioning alcoholic. Like he's. I mean, the amount of cigarettes smoked in this movie, and that's true of like half these movies we're going to cover in the 1981ers, is just astounding. But that's you could get lung cancer just watching some of these movies, the secondhand smoke coming off of your TV screen. But there's just Robert Preston's fantastic. I mean, but also Robert Webber is also fantastic, and they have such a great relationship because they're just like this comedy act where Robert Preston's just fucking with Robert Webber from the second he sees him. He's like, Felix is fine, but I'm worried about you, Ben. You look like 1,000 pounds of condemned veal. Like he's just like fuck, like, and that never lets up. Like he's just needling Robert Webber, who's also great in this, the entire movie, and that's just that's like a vaudeville type relationship. Like it's very much like I don't know if it's Abbott and Costello or whatever do it, but it's very much just like
I breed armadillos.
Do you enjoy your work? Not particularly, but the armadillos seem to enjoy
it. Yeah, like that scene's great, and he's like talking to this gorgeous woman who seems kind of into him. Like I hate to be that asshole that says like, oh, I wish that Irving had his own movie, because we're probably getting the exact right amount of that character. But he was. I don't remember who I'd heard of yet and who I hadn't the first time I saw this movie. I think I knew William Holden from this, and then when I saw Sunset Boulevard, I was like, oh my God, that's the same guy. I mean, we should talk about William Holden because I think it's kind of interesting. He'd done a Western with Blake Edwards, so nothing like this, but William Holden made this movie a couple years before with Billy Wilder called Fedora, which was kind of a spiritual sequel to Sunset Boulevard. It's a mess of a movie, but definitely worth your time. It's definitely a mess. I can't dress it up any better than that. But I do think it's interesting that he's in this movie, which is in its own way as scathing as Sunset Boulevard. This is just a lot funnier. And it's really interesting that this is his last movie. I mean, he dies he hits his head, he splits his head open drinking, and dies. And he looks so much older, but he's only 63. Like he's Tom Cruise's age. Which is crazy to think about. But there's a speech that William Holden gives to a comatose Richard Mulligan. I won't do the whole speech, but he's just like, I've consumed enough booze to ruin a dozen healthy livers. I've engaged in sexual acts that make Caligula look like a celibate monk. And something about William Holden saying that in his last movie, I don't know if it's him being autobiographical or if it's Blake Edwards, but it's still a funny speech. Like the speech is very funny, but yeah, I just think it's interesting that this is his last movie, and obviously it wasn't supposed to be. It isn't like he retires after this. And I do think it's kind of fun to think about, like, oh, well, this guy was in Sunset Boulevard, which is probably the best movie about Hollywood ever, in terms of like looking behind the curtain, that or The Player. We can debate that all night long, and we're not going to tonight. But
yeah, movies. It's funny, like movies about Hollywood and about filmmaking. Movies that take place on a set or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I always like have this attitude about them, like in general, like, well, it's almost like people think of Westerns sometimes. I feel like, where it's just like, oh, I don't really like it, but but every Western I've seen, I've liked. It's like, oh, well, yeah, but Sunset Boulevard's, fantastic. And yeah, S.O.B. is great. And Living in Oblivion, that's a good movie about the life on the set, and like every time every time one comes up, it's actually like I can't think of any bad ones offhand or ones that I don't like.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm like I don't like the idea of it, but I like all of them.
Yeah, because it's the kind of thing that
it seems like too self-referential, so you're like starting at a deficit.
Right. Well, it's funny because you and I both went to film school. And the cliche was, if you couldn't think of what to do for a short film, you made a movie about a guy who couldn't think about what to do for a short film. And I had a guy like that in my class, and his short film was actually really funny because the gags in it were funny. Like the specifics of what he was doing were actually funny and insightful. Living in Oblivion is a great example because that movie is probably
adaptation.
Adaptation is another one. Like that could be such a groaner on paper, but it's so insightful about the creative process. Like the scene in Adaptation where Nick Cage is dictating his ideas and he's so excited, and then like 10 minutes later he's listening to them and he's horrified. Like that's like such a great...
It cuts deep.
Yeah, it cuts totally deep because that's the creative process where it's like you're inspired and then it's like, oh, that's dog shit. What was I thinking? Even like an hour later. So yeah, it's like, it's such a great point because it seems like a maligned genre that almost always works. Because it's about the specifics, and it's this thing that Gene Siskel said that I've quoted. I think I quoted in my episode that I did with Matt about. Oh yeah, when I was talking about In Bruges, which I named as one of the best movies of the 2000s. It's Gene Siskel said this great thing. I think it was him. A movie's not about what it's about, but how it's about it. If I said, "Oh, there's this great movie about Blake Edwards pissing and moaning about how Hollywood fucked him over," it's like, oh, that doesn't sound good. But when you watch it, it's like, oh, this is really funny, and this is really interesting, and this has really got an edge to it, and it's not disjointed. I mean, it feels disjointed, but like he has a very clear vision. Even when like Felix is murdered, I remember the first time I saw this.
It's a mess, but it's an authored mess.
It's an authored mess. But when Richard Mulligan gets gunned down, it's in slow motion, like out of context. That's something you would see in a serious movie. Like he's not playing that for laughs, and he's dying on top of the film. But I'm like, this is the movie he wanted to make. It isn't like he lost control of it. Like this is exactly. You can see Blake Edwards sitting in his screening room with his hands clasped before his face and just being nodding and maybe not giving a fuck if it was a hit or not.
You almost get that sense that like he doesn't care about who the potential audience is for this movie. It's just like it's just like this is my exercise here. This is this is just something I need to make. And, and if somebody else likes it, great. Yeah,
I mean it's presumably a blank check movie because 10 was a hit. And 10 was a movie that is smaller and is about a guy going through a midlife crisis and sort of chasing this young girl who's just like, 10 is it's one of my favorite movies of his, but 10 is a much more serious movie for all the slapstick that's in it. This, I think there are serious things going on in S.O.B, but it's about an innately unserious thing, which is about Hollywood. Like, that's important to him. And I could see a mass audience even in 1981 kind of being like, I don't.
Yeah, he's kind of telling you, I know all this is bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's
another one of my absolute favorite line in the film. I'm not going to that bullshit funeral. It's like even a funeral in Hollywood. Completely full of shit.
I'll probably cut this, but do you remember Billy said, I got to say that in context?
I think we were just talking about that, and I think he repeated that again.
He was so excited to say, I'm not going to that bullshit funeral. And it was about somebody who actually died. He was so excited to get to use that in context. An opportunity I have not had. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, the movie is called S.O.B, Standard Operational Bullshit. And I just find this movie just so rich. Just so much is going on. And look, there are naked women and there's slapstick and there's like scatology in this movie, unlike anything I've ever seen. But it's all funny, I don't think there's a lot of sex in this movie, but there's not even like a ton of nudity. And there's a lot of like topless women, and maybe not even a lot. Maybe it just seems like a lot. But Blake Edwards' relationship to sex is so interesting because it really kind of starts in 10, and like 10, S.O.B, and Skin Deep is kind of like this trilogy in a weird way. 10 and Skin Deep are definitely brothers because it's both about a guy dealing with a midlife crisis. Skin Deep, I mean, not to jump around, but I think Skin Deep is the best movie about addiction ever made. And Blake Edwards also made The Days of Wine and Roses, which is also way up there.
Yeah, I think Skin Deep's like really underrated. I mean, I absolutely love Skin Deep.
Skin Deep's fantastic, and sadly, it was not his last movie. He made 2 very shitty movies after it, but if that had been his last movie, that would have been, such a great way to go out. But Skin Deep is his last. It's a lot like this. It's a rich white guy. He's traveling in LA's upper echelon. It's a lot of beautiful women in and out, and it's Malibu and all that other stuff. So it's like I just think of Blake Edwards, like the way you think of like Woody Allen, you think of like The Streets of New York, or like Spike Lee, like The Streets of New York. And when I think of Blake Edwards, I just think about LA, I think about the beach, I think about a rich white dude who's very sophisticated but kind of an idiot at the same time, driving around in a convertible. I mean, he made movies. I mean, look, he made movies like the Pink Panther movies are set in Paris and all over the world, and he made all kinds of movies. But I really just kind of associate him with Los Angeles because I feel like most of the great movies he made are set there. With exception. I mean, of course, the Pink Panther movies are set in France and sometimes in other countries as well. But
those 3 movies, like you just feel like, they're autobiographical, of course. It's just like a rudderless life. Like there's no set schedules, or it's like you understand, kind of vaguely what his job is and everything, but like it's like what kind of existence is this out there?
And all the guys are successful. Like even though Felix, we're seeing him on the worst day of his job, obviously. He's a very rich man. The Dudley Moore character is like an Oscar-winning composer. The John Ritter character in Skin Deep is a very celebrated novelist. So none of these guys are like fuck-ups in terms of like, they're not rudderless in terms of like their careers, even though they experience, at least 2 of those cases are having career trouble. But yeah, it's he really is so great, and I think under-celebrated at just sort of capturing like an atmosphere of this town, of Los Angeles. It's like, I think a lot of Robert Altman movies I have a hard time engaging with because they're kind of formless and they're ensemble pieces. And this on paper is the same thing. This is a movie that has got a very threadbare plot. There's no clear main character, but it's as singular to Blake Edwards as Nashville is to Altman in terms of like no one else could have, regardless of what you think of Altman. I know he could be kind of polarizing, but Altman's very singular. Like no one, there's no one else like him. And I think Blake Edwards is the same way, because in the early going, I think Blake Edwards was very much trying to be Billy Wilder. I mean, he works with a lot of this. He makes Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is Audrey Hepburn. He makes Operation Petticoat, which is Cary Grant and Tony Curtis. Like, he works with a lot of the same actors, and I think he becomes kind of his own person as Wilder's career kind of stalls out. Blake Edwards, who's much younger, he kind of like blows up and becomes his own thing, and I think it's sort of like how, Paul Thomas Anderson's first 2 or 3 movies, it's like he's very much trying to be Altman versus Scorsese, and he becomes his own thing, whether you like it or not. Like from There Will Be Blood on, it's like, okay, he's not doing that anymore. He's definitely doing something else. Like it, don't like it, whatever. And I think that's kind of the same with Blake Edwards. I mean, he's not somebody that we talk about as an auteur, and I think he's sort of forgotten, and that's unacceptable to me. There's so much just great dialogue in this. But
it doesn't feel like comedy. Like it all feels like kind of within like coming from the characters and within the
what these guys would say. Yeah,
exactly. It's like like when he says the line about "I breed armadillos" to that girl, it sounds like he's genuinely like hitting on her, making like flirting with her and making small talk, and trying to be ridiculous at this drug-addled party, it doesn't sound like just slapstick, and
even that image, it's just that image of the scene we're talking about. Just that frame is just like, okay, it's this gorgeous beach house in Malibu. You hear like this soft Henry Mancini jazz in the background. There's like scantily clad women everywhere. There's a beautiful woman. There's some drug use. It's just, I don't know, I know I'm hitting this point rather hard. I feel like this movie, maybe more than any other that he's made, just typifies him. I could have that wrong. I mean, certainly 10 has a lot of that too. And there's a lot of this shares a lot. He makes this right after 10. So there's definitely, it's breathing a lot of the same air, but I think it's got a different, 10 is a smaller, more intimate movie. And I think that's why it's more celebrated and probably why it was more successful, because it's really just about this one guy going through this, this midlife crisis and how it affects the 2 or 3 people around him. Really just 2 people.
Well, this movie doesn't have the courtesy of like trying to be an actual movie. That's the difference.
But it's so great. That's what's what you're saying could be negative.
It's so like unruly.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is like kind of. It's almost what Tarantino would call like a hangout movie.
The nerve of like the movie to go on for 25 minutes
after he kills himself, to intercut like between a funeral and their private Viking funeral out on the water. It's just like insanity.
Yeah, and again, it's really indulgent, but I think it's okay.
It doesn't even like the Viking funeral stuff. Like doesn't even connect to anything else really in the movie. It's just like it's like, where is this coming from?
I remember the last time. I don't know when it was. The last time you, me, and Billy watched it, maybe it was like late New Year's Eve, and like people were kind of, and we just threw it on.
Yeah, that was a New Year's Eve movie. That was
but not because it's bad, because we all liked it. We were showing it
for anybody listening. New Year's Eve was traditionally for us a time to watch to watch either terrible movies or crazy movies or just kind of like a movie that kind of had a little extra something to it.
Right, that you didn't have to pay attention to. Like a great example. The last time I remember doing is we watched Zardoz, which if you don't even know what that movie is, congratulations, you're in the majority. But
a movie that's off the rails in some form or another.
But right from the beginning, it isn't like it starts out promisingly and goes off the. It's like from from the first frame of Zardoz, it's a floating head with a drawn-on pencil mustache talking for what seems like 3 hours, and that's how the movie starts. And at one point, Sean Connery's in a wedding dress.
It's insane that they got Sean Connery in like that red diaper with the with a handlebar mustache, and
otherwise naked.
Yeah,
like it's just bizarre.
Yeah, that movie's bizarre. But anyway, I remember the last time. Or my last memory of the last time the three of us watched this movie, because Billy Corbin's a huge fan of this movie also. When it got to the Viking funeral part, I think Billy says, like, this is a very strange last half hour for this movie. But I don't think he meant it in a derisive way. 'Cause that's the thing, like, the movie changes to like this, almost like this caper of, oh, let's go steal Felix's body from the morgue. And then it does kind of focus on these three guys. And I could see someone saying, I was having fun with the movie, but once Felix got killed, it just lost me. Like, I could see a person saying that and be like, yeah, I don't agree, but I could totally see that. I could see some critics being like, yeah, it's fun until Richard Mulligan gets killed, and then it becomes a different movie, and it doesn't know what it wants to be. I think it still knows exactly what it wants to be. It wants to be a movie.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like he's painting himself in a corner. Like, it feels like, no, this is what I want to do.
This is exactly what he wants to do. This is.
It's funny. It's not dissimilar
to later on, Big Lebowski. Just like this a movie that's not a movie that's kind of funny like that, in that it has a quote unquote plot. That it's got a very plotty plot.
It's a film noir. It's a PI. Yeah,
but it's also no plot because that's not actually a thing. The kidnapping. Right. It's like almost just a lie and mistaken, and a series of mistakes, and in the third act, like the Donnie stuff and everything, like it's just out of left field, and it's like, and it's completely veering off course if there is a course, and you're just like, where is this going? I remember the first time seeing that, I was surprised at the last scene. I didn't know I was watching the last scene. I was like, why are we? But similar. But the thing is, like Big Lebowski, it's kind of very like, it's like this pot-induced thing where it's like okay, this movie, the meandering is like because the character is shiftless and unable to follow through and everything like that. Right. It's like ingrained into what the movie's about. This, it's just like, no, I'm just, this is just like, because fuck you, I want I want to do this. That's all. I just want this to just, be whatever. Like I'm not sitting here and with the Sid Field book, to figure this out cleanly. This is just what I want to do. So, deal with it.
And again, it's so weird because he's at arguably the apex of his career. Like he's done a personal movie that was a box office hit, and he presumably had a blank check to do whatever he wanted. And like you said when we started, he just had to get this out. He just was like, the success wasn't enough of a balm on the heel, on the wound of Darling Lily and whatever else, that the success of 10 did not like, he didn't go, oh, well, you know what, like I went through a rough time, but and going back to Pink Panther kind of sucked, but it paid off because I got to make 10, and 10 was a hit. And now I can do whatever
it was the three big Pink Panther movies, 75,
76, 78, 10, 79. It's like
all hits.
It's like the height of his career.
Yeah, he is a bankable, maybe even name recognizable, like he is a bankable 70s auteur coming off a string of, 3 of those are part of a franchise, but 10 is like, a personal movie that does well. And he in his 80s, the movies that come after, it's real up and down, up and down, up and down. He makes Victor Victoria, which I think is a really good movie. It's his only Oscar nomination. He's nominated for Best Screenplay, and that's pretty well received. But it's a lot of shit that doesn't work. Like portrayal of the Pink Panther is abominable. It's miserable. It's awful. It's not even a real movie. And I'm comfortable saying that because I'm a huge fan of almost all the other ones. And, you know, The Man Who Loved Women doesn't quite work. Mickey and Maude is fantastic. That's a great movie that people don't know about, but it's up and down. You and I have a soft spot for Blind Date. I think That's Life is a really interesting movie. Skin Deep, I think, is a masterpiece, but it's really erratic. And then sadly, like most directors, his last two movies are fucking terrible. Switch is bad, and Son of the Pink Panther is an abomination. It's horrendous. But, you know, that's true of a lot of great directors. You certainly don't have to end strong for me to respect you.
I didn't really think about, like, that Victoria came, you know, like right after S.O.B. either. Like, you know, basically, I think the last time he directed Julie Andrews was the Tamarind Seed.
No, that was before this. The last movie he did with her was, I think, That's Life. You know that movie with Jack Lemmon and Julie Andrews? Have you ever seen that one? It's really interesting. They shot it in their house in Malibu. It's a much smaller movie. I recommend that movie. It's Jack Lemmon's turning 60 and he's having this crisis, and Julie Andrews, you know, gets like a biopsy in her throat. So she spends the whole movie wondering if she has cancer. And it's a real Robert Lodge is in that one too, and it's a really interesting movie. It's very small. I mean, I don't think a big studio did it. I recommend That's Life if you can even find it. God knows if there's even a DVD of it. But that's the last movie.
It was a few years later. She had like that botched throat surgery.
Yeah. Do you want to tell? You have an incredible story about this movie. I really want you to tell it.
Well, it's kind of funny. Like, you know, we talk about how like. How, you know, this is like a special Blake Edwards movie for us, and you know, and a movie that a lot of people haven't even heard of.
No.
But I was in LA. I think it was the first time I was in LA.
Yes, it was
for a wedding.
Yeah.
And I was at the rehearsal dinner, and. You know, it was a nice restaurant. I don't remember what the restaurant was. I'm looking around, and there's Julie Andrews and Blake Edwards having dinner at the next table, and nobody knows who they are. At least at my table, nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody recognized her. Certainly, nobody recognized him.
Well, and
yeah,
I'm not sure I would have either if she wasn't with him. I mean, I know what he looked like, but not. I don't know if I could have picked him.
I waited until we were eating. I was like, all right, I'm not going to go over there and bother them. I told my wife, you know, like let's leave them alone. You know, she knew, you know, she had seen S.O.B. So, you know, she was also very excited.
Yeah.
But we sat and finally, you know, I saw they were finished. They finished the meal, they had paid, and they were about to get up from the table. So I was like, all right, you know, let's, you know, when they're walking through the restaurant, you know, like we can, you know, bump into that. So I got up and I walked over, and so what do? I immediately, I told them, you know, that I was a very big fan, and you know, you know, their work was, you know, important to me, and blah blah blah, and what do I bring up? S.O.B. I said, and S.O.B. I just, you know, is one of my, you know, all-time favorite films. It's like you're talking to Julie Andrews, you're talking to Mary Poppins. You know, I mean, you know, you got The Sound of Music. You know, these are formative films.
Sure.
For just about everyone. And you know, and I'm talking about the movie. You know, and I'm talking about S.O.B. You know, mainly to her husband, to Blake Edwards. And you know, and to Blake Edwards, S.O.B. of all films that he made, and you know, and of course the movie where, you know, his wife, you know, goes topless. And but you know, they were very gracious, and I think he was amused, and you know, he looked, you know, he was pretty old, but you know, they were very nice, and you know, and thanked me and everything, and you know, and I let them go. I didn't detain them for very long.
Well, a couple things not to tell your story, but a couple things that you really, because I saw you later that night like maybe like 2 hours later, I saw you.
Oh, that's right. I may have forgotten.
Well, here are the two details that I think you forgot that I think add color to this story. I'll go out of order. So you told Blake Edwards what you just said. S.O.B. is one of my favorite movies, and you said we have the poster in our office, and he said something to the effect of like, how's that possible? He said something like that. But just before that, as you were walking up, what Stephanie, your ex-wife, told me that night, I think this is such a beautiful part of this story, and I'm not saying that to be funny, is you were walking up and you said first, whatever you said, excuse me, Mr. Edwards, and the way Stephanie told it is that Julie Andrews was so excited that somebody was approaching him, not her, and that somebody was recognizing him, not her. And like her face kind of lit up, so I think that's why.
I assume she gets stopped a lot more than he does, you know. So yeah, there's your LA story. You know,
your first.
I didn't have to go to the Ivy.
Yeah. And kind of the last chance because he was very old. Like he wins the honorary Oscar 3 years before that, and he's in a wheelchair. They make a joke out of it, like the wheelchair crashes to a wall, and like he's a good sport about it. But yeah, I mean, he makes his last movie in 1993. And he's already, I think, 70 or so then. So yeah, I mean, he was obviously very close to the end of his life. But it's incredible that you got to talk to him. I talked to him about this movie, however briefly. I wanted people to know that story.
Yeah, I was very fortunate.
If you had a relationship with him and could talk to him more about this movie, or if I had that relationship with him, I really would want to ask him why the porno scene in this movie is so fucking scary. First time it's so scary.
Nothing about it makes any sense. So.
Yeah.
That's just one other thing about it that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like this is a part of the movie. I mean, they open the movie with this song from the movie, so that you'll get the joke about how they changed the set and put in like naked women and guys in like jock straps and all this other stuff. So it makes it's set up payoff. It's that old comedy thing. It makes perfect sense. But I remember I was definitely too young to see this movie when I saw it. Like all these movies, like all these R-rated movies I saw when I was way too young. But this was like, and watching it again the other day, I'm like, this is like kind of fucking scary. Like the music, I mean, Henry Mancini's an incredible composer, and the music is just like, boom, 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 boom. It sounds like almost like hardcore.
And that weirdo guy, like, dancing up against her and everything.
Yeah. It's like, even in the context of this movie, I don't quite understand like because it isn't really a porno. It's like the same movie. You don't get it's like it's like the same story, but it's like very sexualized. I don't know that it's quite a porno because I don't think they don't even talk about Sally having sex with any of these people. It's really just that she's going to get nude, and you see the very end of the movie in the screening room, and I'm like, okay, this isn't really a porno. I know that's how you described it in the beginning. I think it's just that he's just recontextualizing this movie, making it all about sex.
It's like a complete abstract idea, like a plot point, because there's no it's not meant to make literal sense that like this is what would have saved this movie.
Yeah, and it's such a crazy thing because
it doesn't make any sense if you're thinking about it as a realistic solution.
But this part, we love this movie. But this stretch, because you're sort of within the movie, they don't break the spell. Like you're with the Julie Andrews character. So much like the opening credit sequence, he's immersing you in this fake movie. Like you're in Night Wind. You're watching Night Wind as if you were sitting in the theater and watching it. It's not till she runs off the set that you see like, the crew with William Holden as the director and all this other stuff. But like, it's so fucking weird. And I don't understand why this old man, like the jock in the box, but he's like a 70-year-old man. Like it's like I don't know that I'm attacking this part of the movie, but I really would have a hard time defending this part of the movie. Like I was just thinking about it when I was watching. I'm like, I love this movie, but I don't know I don't know if I could show this movie in a weird way to anybody who hadn't seen it. Like, you have to like kind of discover it on your own. Like, I don't know if like, if I hosted a screening of S.O.B, I'd love to do that, by the way. Like, I feel like at the end I'd be like, I'd be like, and I don't know. This is like, I don't know. Cause you and I and Billy too, like came across this movie, you know, we watched it on video on like a 1/2-inch VHS, like, you know, like it I don't know, like just what the fuck is going on? I mean, I guess like in a weird way, he's sort of like asking me to like, oh yeah, this is like crazy, this movie. But then the movie ends up making $300 million or whatever it is at the end. But this freaked me out when I was a kid, and watching it the other day, I'm like, this is like really freaky. I just don't understand what the movie is that they're making.
No, well, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure. I might be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure Julie Andrews was, you know, in the movie she has to like get drunk and high to do the role.
They give her a shot,
do the scene.
Yeah,
they give her the goofy shot or whatever. But I'm pretty sure she was a little buzzed when they shot the scene as well.
Oh, in real life, interesting. Is that true?
Or just completely made that up.
Dubious Dave. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder. Yeah, it's. I'm not bashing this part of the movie, but it's so strange. Like, I don't know that like, oh, there was a better way to do that. Again, I think he's doing exactly what he wants to do.
He just needs like I feel like, you know, it's like not even, well, first of all, he's got Darling Lily, and like I don't know if anything would have fixed that, you know, like right. I mean, I watched the trailer, I read the synopsis, I watched a couple scenes, and I was like, I don't know, it didn't look like an absolute disaster, but
it was just it was out of style. It was like 5 years too late for that movie.
Successful. It was, you know, and you know, like he's making a movie, you know, the plot in this movie is almost non-existent, and what plot there is are broad strokes. And so he's starting with Darling Lily. It's got to go somewhere unexpected and off the rails, you know, like, so he's like, well, why don't we, you know, like if it went in the other direction, you know, like what's the other direction, you know, like make it a dirty movie or something, you know, make it a dark, dirty movie instead of a positive, right, you know, movie with America's darling, you know, like, right, who's known for children's movies and stuff. Yeah. And like, what's the opposite of a children's movie? You know, like, a hard R, you know, like whatever, like, right, like it's just, there's no more, I feel like there's no more thought to it than that. You know, it's just like, okay, let's run with that. And like, you know, yeah, like okay, well now we got to actually produce this whole musical number, you know, to manifest this. And it's like, and it is just fucking weird.
It's so weird. And it's so, I mean, Henry Mancini is like his John Williams. They scored God knows how many movies together. I mean, Henry Mancini does whenever they start, Henry Mancini does every one of his movies except for Mickey and Maude. I couldn't tell you why, but I mean, it's the collaborator he worked, and Henry Mancini's fantastic. And like John Williams, Henry Mancini's best stuff is with Blake Edwards, like just like John Williams' best stuff is with Spielberg for the most part. You know, so I'm only comparing him on that. You know, also like Bernard Herrmann and Hitchcock, like they really were just simpatico. So the music is just so dark and disturbing, and it's always confounded me, and it's certainly not funny, and it's not played for laughs. It's just like that's like the part of the movie that's just like what, like, I don't know if pornos looked like that in the early 80s, or if again, I'm not even sure this is a porno, because this is like, I think it's just a movie that's like highly sexualized, but we never get a sense of what the movie is.
It also kind of has to be, you know, weird or, you know, or screwy somehow. Right. Just because, like, you know, it's got to kind of almost be an unexpected hit, you know, like, you know, right, it's got to be like the producers were like, yeah, you know, this is everybody thinks it's a crazy idea, so they've got to like think it's a crazy idea for a reason, right? You know, like that's about as much sense as it makes. It's like, yeah, right, that's a fucking crazy idea. Well, it's like, yes, this movie's crazy. This movie, you know, this can't possibly work, and then of course it does.
I think I like about this movie, and it's not exactly innovative, but I do think it's meaning like I think every Hollywood movie does that, is that he really does paint this picture of almost to a person, everyone in this movie being greedy, like Sally's assistant, He's greedy.
It's quite an ensemble. I mean, there's a lot of scene, like Richard Mulligan is hardly in the first half of the movie. He didn't talk for the first half of the movie.
Well, he's catatonic. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's an ensemble. Like and everybody's kind of like everybody for themselves,
Yeah, and even the funeral directors who aren't even in the industry, you see that one scene of them, it's like, after the farmer funeral, we can raise our rates, and we'll use that as a centerfold, and then we see how terrible those people are, because they're just like, well, we're not admitting that the body got stolen, fuck that, and those people are in like 2 scenes of the movie, if that. So I just think like that's sort of a beat that every Hollywood movie has, but I think I think one of the kind of tragic things about this movie is sticking with the assistant, and his name is Gary, how he kind of fucks over Julie Andrews. Like he kind of like talks her into like, he really seizes on her in her most vulnerable moment.
He's like super ambitious.
Yeah. And he gets his way at the funeral. He's like, I got your contracts, Gary. Be in my office at 10. Like he gets what he wants. And, the Julie Andrews character, I think it's, she was topless and that was a big thing. But like, I feel like she's probably the only nice character in this movie. And I think like she's like the only decent character. And like he does, like when she's like comes in hot and throws the Oscar at her, it's like, I see her point. It's like he kind of stabbed her in the back, and he kind of like is being very cavalier about like her image and everything. So I don't think she comes off crazy. I think like we're supposed to be on Sally's side there, So I do think that scene, I think Blake Edwards is, who did do some serious movies. I think there's just enough realism in this movie for me to not write it off as just complete insanity. And I think that scene with the assistant is played very seriously, and and you just feel bad for her, because it's like, she's not an idiot, but she's being seized on her most, these people are conspiring against her. Her agent and her assistant are,
well, the unseriousness of this movie, it's like, it strikes me like, Dr. Strangelove, like, he just like felt like, this is best done as biting satire and not, and not taken seriously. And
right.
I don't know. It still comes across as very personal and,
because he made some serious movies, like, the Days of Wine and Roses is, one of the most gut-wrenching movies I've ever seen. I have to imagine when he finished that movie, he had to say to himself, like, I'm making the silliest fucking movie next. His next movie is The Pink Panther. I have to imagine that he had to have, not that he was unproud of the movie. That movie was very successful, but if you watch Days of Wine and Roses and you watch S.O.B. or any of his comedies, it's like, I cannot believe the same guy did this. Yeah. And it's interesting because, we're recording this a couple of days after Rob Reiner was tragically murdered. And I think Rob Reiner, worked in a lot of different genres, at least in the early going. And Ron Howard and Barry Levinson and Lawrence Kasdan were the same way. Those guys, the first 10 years of their careers, it's like they do a lot of different genres. And I think Blake Edwards did that too. But I think that, his comedies were just so iconic that they usurped the Westerns and thrillers and serious movies that he made, with the possible exception of Days of Wine and Roses. I think that's the only serious movie. And Breakfast at Tiffany's is sort of a, is a comedy, but obviously has a very dramatic side to it. It's like a hybrid. Yeah. It's a hybrid. And that's probably, that's a very famous movie. I just don't know that movie's associated with him that much. I think people think of that movie, they think of Audrey Hepburn and, the iconography from it. I think a lot of people like, oh yeah, Blake Edwards did that. Our friend Matt's not a Blake Edwards fan, but likes Breakfast at Tiffany's. And I always have to break it to him that Blake Edwards directed that movie. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'll give him credit for that, but because you just don't think of it as one of his movies, and that's not to take it away from him. But when you think about Blake Edwards, you think of The Pink Panther and 10. Certainly not the movie that we're talking about today. Speaking of Breakfast at Tiffany's, I do want to sort of call out the one thing in this movie that's sort of indefensible, which is the Swami at the end, played by Larry Storch. I think it's
funny.
I think it's funny too, but I wrote down Swami, not even the most racist thing in the Edwards canon. That would be Mickey Rooney playing the Japanese man in Breakfast at Tiffany's. So it's not even the most racist thing that he's ever done in a movie.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, Mickey Rooney, I think, wins.
Mickey Rooney wins it, and if people knew about S.O.B., they would be offended. If they even knew that was a white guy in makeup. I didn't know who the actor was when the first 30 million times I saw this movie. But yeah, there's like a lot of touches in this movie. I think even when Blake Edwards is not being subtle, it's still, which is a lot of the time, it's still very well done. Like, we were just talking about how the Gary, he's on the phone with, I guess her name is Ava, and he's just like, well, if I bring it off, she'll probably call you herself. They're conspiring against Julie Andrews. And then as they're doing that, you see the Chinese cook chop the head off the chicken. And
yeah, I mean, it's a weird. It's not just like it's not just a strange like structurally. It's like a kind of a weird like combination of like French comedy. The kind of his broader stuff and and
car chase,
and physical comedy,
like
and
car crash, like car chases.
Mm-hmm.
They have like right before Felix gets killed, he steals a car and the cops are chasing him. And he puts the car through his house, or I guess it's his wife's house, and then like another guy crashes to a billboard. I mean, that's like Pink Panther shit. I mean, it's like or Buster Keaton or whatever. I mean, Blake Edwards is a disciple of all that stuff. But like, I mean, it's like that's just kind of. I mean, that might have been him being like, well, I'll put a car crash in just to like zhuzh it up a little bit. But like, it's that's the kind of shit you see in the broader Pink Panther movies, which is to say the last three, the ones he made in the 70s, like driving through a fucking wall, like in slow motion, and people like jumping out of the way. I mean, that's just like, it's so unnecessary, and then it's followed 2 minutes later, by this guy getting gunned down, which again, slow motion, no sound, like the Wild Bunch. Like he's playing that seriously.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's like, you're kind of, you're kind of trying to decipher, a 3-act structure and everything, and then you're also kind of trying to decipher a tone, like sometimes, and like sometimes it's kind of meandering, and and then it's very, and then it's very biting, and it's just that's part of the thing.
Yeah, I think the scene
all over the place.
Yeah, the line that you quoted as your favorite, I'm not going to that bullshit funeral, comes in the scene that follows where William Holden, Robert Webber, and Robert Preston are sitting in a bar, and presumably it's like the night of, and they're mourning the loss of their friend. William Holden says something like, there's so few people in this town that have a conscience, and it's like this serious conversation, but the Robert Webber character is so drunk, he's saying a lot of funny shit. And I feel like he is really doing two things at once, because I really do feel like he's talking about the thing that drove him to make this movie, which is about like how insane this industry is and how venal and vile the people are. But, it's also funny. Like it never.
Yeah, it's also like, don't take this too seriously. Like, don't take anything that goes on here too seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so fascinating. And I mean, the last half hour where they're stealing the body, you could say belongs in a different movie, but in a weird way, I do think it's like these guys saying like, well, this is bullshit. They killed Felix indirectly. We're going to give him the send off. We're going to take him out on his boat. We're going to set him on fire, But it's intercut with this beautiful Julie Andrews song, and
put the Viking helmet on him.
That's one of my favorite lines. Also, where Robert Preston picks up the Viking helmet and he goes, "From the cast and crew of the Pagan Plunder. I never saw that one." And Robert goes, "Terrible reviews, grossed a fortune." It's like and then you hear all the movies that Felix was involved in, and it's like, oh, was this guy like just a schlockmeister? like the titles, like, Love on a Pogo Stick and Creme de la Creme, and like none of these movies sound like they're particularly supposed to be good. So it's like, was this guy like kind of a schlockmeister? Because you don't get that sense up until that point. You think, like Night Wind, again, I think it is supposed to be Darling. It is supposed to be Darling Lily. So if that were a hit, it could have worked. It's a big Julie Andrews musical. So like Darling Lily itself on paper was a smart investment. She had been in the biggest musical of all time. But do you take my point? It's like, was Felix supposed to be like a shitty producer, or rather the movies were like big and shitty, but made money anyway? And was that something that like we weren't supposed to know, or am I reading too much into it? Like,
I don't know. I guess like you said, like Darling Lily, like, you see that all the time. It's like they, it repeat until, and it works and works and works until it doesn't, and like, that's really the only way you really get change, I feel like in this business anyway. Everybody wants, now you look at it, everybody wants exactly what they've already seen. Nobody wants to be sold something they haven't already seen.
Right. Well, Stephen Bach,
kind of crazy.
Stephen Bach, I think, said this great thing in the book Final Cut, where he says like the movie industry is like going to a spot where lightning has already struck and saying, here.
Right.
And
that's, isn't that Darling Lily?
Yeah.
Isn't that the point?
Right. But Darling Lily was a trend. Like, they were still making big musicals. It isn't like it was a remake of Sound of Music. It was a big shit musical. And I think Night Wind, I don't think anything about Night Wind was supposed to be like terrible. It just didn't make money. It's like, it isn't like it was like this crazy idea he had that didn't make.
That's the cardinal sin.
Yeah. Like he's in trouble because his movie didn't make money and it went a little over budget, maybe a lot over budget. The numbers that get thrown around obviously are comically low. Similarly, when the spotter or the editor says, "Oh, the movie's 163 minutes long," I'm like, that's not long anymore. There's like, this movie's 2 hours. This movie that we're talking about today is like 2 hours or 2 hours and 5 minutes, whatever it is. It's certainly not, it's not 210. Like S.O.B, if by some miracle it were made today, it'd be 2 hours and 35 minutes. It'd be way too fucking long. And that's a big thing on hindsighting. I'm always talking about the length, whether positive or negative. This movie, again, it's very fair to say this movie is disjointed and has no plot. I think those are fair criticisms, but you don't bring those up as criticisms, like, at least I don't think you are. I think that's almost.
It's just, I get the divide, I get the controversy about this movie, the strong opinions about the movie.
Yeah. I do think, and this obviously was not intended, the last shot we see of William Holden, which is the last time we see him in the movie at all, is where he says, "So long, pal." That's obviously not something Blake Edwards didn't know, that William Holden was going to die. But I think that's just one of those, that kind of just got me a little bit. Let's talk about categorically denied. Now, normally you were on the Lord of the Rings episode. So normally this is the part of the episode where I decide what Oscars our movies should keep. Now, this movie didn't win any Oscars, so we can give the gift of giving. So I'm going to run down some categories, some Oscar categories that we can nominate this movie in. We don't have to decide if it wins anything, but you tell me, I'm going to go through like the Oscar categories, not all of them, and you tell me if you would nominate S.O.B for one of these categories. So obviously you and I love this movie. We would nominate it for Best Picture. Is that fair?
Would we nominate it for Best Picture? Would I nominate this movie for Best Picture?
Right. If you had like as many slots as you wanted, you don't have to confine it to 5. I'm saying like let's say we have 10 slots. You don't have to fill the other 9. Would you pick best? Would you nominate S.O.B as one of the best movies of 1981? Forgetting if you don't have to hand it the award, and forgetting how many other movies you have to,
Right. With 10 slots, probably.
Okay. That's fair.
I don't know. I can't say that with certainty, but
sure, there could be 20 slots. The amount of slots doesn't matter. I'm just saying, this isn't.
I would say it's probably in the top 20 of the year. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's certainly safe.
Okay. Best Director, Blake Edwards. Would you nominate him as for Best Director? Again, he doesn't have to take the award.
Probably not.
Really? Okay. Interesting. What about
for S.O.B? I don't know.
What would you give it to him for then? What would you nominate Blake Edwards for Best Director? Any movie that he's made.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah. Well, let's. Yeah.
Shot in the Dark is is great. I think Breakfast at Tiffany's is great.
Okay. That's fine. Those are good answers.
I love Return of the Pink Panther. I don't know if that would be the one, but I probably 10 probably wins out over Skin Deep, even though personally I'm more fond personally of Skin Deep.
Interesting.
But
yeah.
Maybe Days of Morning Roses, but yeah, let's go with 10.
Okay. Best screenplay.
Probably not.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, are we still in 20?
No, I don't even think it's about. I don't necessarily think it's about knocking someone out. I think it's really just about unto itself, just nominating it. It doesn't have to win, and it doesn't have to knock.
Yeah, probably not. Just just from a politics standpoint, I would just say this does not strike me as as the type of movie to be nominated, and it wasn't.
Well, it definitely wasn't. What about Best Supporting Actor Robert Preston?
That's interesting. That could be like a dark horse kind of. Yeah. That, you could see that happening.
Yeah, I could see him getting nominated. I'd have to look at who the nominee. I know John Gielgud wins for Arthur, but yeah, I think it's the kind of thing in the 80s, for all my complaining about how stuffy they were. Kevin Kline wins Best Supporting Actor for Fish Called Wanda, and that's nothing if not unexpected. It's certainly not a movie. He's fantastic in that. That's not anything anybody's like, oh, he's going to win an Oscar for this. So
right.
Yeah, I guess my question, which you've answered, but I want to ask it anyway. Do you think a movie like this could be nominated today with 10 slots and a younger, more international Academy sensibility? Or do you think it's still just too fucking weird for even a present day, younger, more international Academy?
I don't know if any movie's too weird today.
Okay. That's interesting.
Or too small, and in fact, that's kind of, So yeah, it's probably more likely today.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, I think that this movie, to kind of wrap things up, this movie is a very strong flavor, and it's a very distinct flavor. And of all the 1981ers that we're going to be doing, I have to think about. I'm not going to do all the ones that I rattled off at the end of the Chariots episode, but I do think that this movie, even though I think it's quintessentially Blake Edwards, I could see some people vibing with it, and I could see some people being like, no, and I don't know that's necessarily the case with the other movies I'll be covering in this miniseries. We talked about Modern Romance, the Albert Brooks movie. And I think that's a similar thing. And that movie's nothing like this, but that's like a lot of cringe comedy and about a real toxic, person.
It's also this S.O.B. is also going back to what I mentioned earlier is it's one of these Hollywood behind the scenes movies about movies,
right.
That a lot of times I feel have to, some people just don't care about that, right. The player, I think, is kind of, it turned some people off. I don't think the player was for everybody. I don't think the player, everybody was interested in the studio politics and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's just inside baseball, and some people don't care about inside baseball or movies about baseball for that matter, or about the business of baseball or whatever, it's kind of in that sense, it's starting out kind of niche, and and then on top of that, it's not like, oh, well, I'm going to make a, that's just what this movie's about. Now I'm gonna, I'm gonna make this, this really entertaining and good movie that you'll appreciate and overcome that. He's like, no, now I've got beef and and I've got a hit list here, and that's what this whole thing is a setting for.
Yeah.
And so you're either in or you're out.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, I think you're characterizing it perfectly. Let me ask you this, without putting you on the spot or feeling like you have to rank them. What's either your favorite Blake Edwards movie or your favorite 3 or 4, however many you want? I mean, you don't have. If you have a favorite, I'd love to hear it. But if you have even just a couple,
my 3 or 4 favorite Blake Edwards movies.
Yeah, just 3 or 4.
I mean, I love A Shot in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
I do love Breakfast at Tiffany's. I love Skin Deep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Pink Panther Strikes. Return of the Pink Panther is my second favorite after Shot in the Dark. For the Clouseau movies.
Yeah, mine too.
And those are probably in the top for me. I like The Great Race.
Yeah.
But that's probably that list is, if it's not in order, those are certainly the ones on top, and S.O.B, of course.
Yeah. So I'll run down my list really quickly. A lot of things we've talked about. Last night I talked about Blowout, and I ended by talking about my top 10 Brian De Palma movies. And so my top 10 Blake Edwards movies, I'll just kind of run through them. Number 10 is The Great Race. Number 9 is the original Pink Panther. Number 8 is The Days of Wine and Roses. Number 7 is Revenge of the Pink Panther. Number 6 is Mickey and Maude. Number 5 is Return of the Pink Panther. Number 4 is Skin Deep. Number 3 is 10. Number 2 is S.O.B. And number 1 is A Shot in the Dark. So yeah, I think we talked about the same movies, but for me, A Shot in the Dark is just fucking perfect. And
yeah, A Shot in the Dark is just is a class act.
Yeah, well, that's
like for me, it's the kind of the perfecting of that of that brand of humor, almost like European, like a French sensibility.
I mentioned it in our episode that our top 10. I mean, obviously didn't come out in the 2000s, but when I was talking, Matt Weiner had talked about Shaun of the Dead being in his top 10 of the 2000s, and I said that I feel like Edgar Wright is a lot like Blake Edwards in that when he satirizes a genre, he also makes a superior example of it. And I think like Shaun of the Dead is a great zombie movie, Hot Fuzz is a great action movie, and I think that A Shot in the Dark is actually a really good thriller that just happens to be funny. But I think if you were to but it's brilliantly shot. Like the opening of A Shot in the Dark, which is without dialogue, is what Blake Edwards does so well, which is like people jumping from one room to another to screw each other. But it's a lot of unbroken takes. It's really just beautifully done. And that I think is that opening sequence of A Shot in the Dark, I think is just beautiful.
Yeah, and it's a full story right there. Like you see who's sleeping with who, behind everybody, behind their spouse's back and everything, and and the murder, the inciting incident.
Yeah, and it's done, and you can see he did make one or two.
Dialogue.
Yeah, he did make one or two serious movies, and you could see how he could have had a very good career as like a serious, like a director of thrillers, and he has, and you see it in S.O.B. too. Like he's a real filmmaker and he knows what he's doing. And I think that a lot of comedies in general, the craft just isn't there. Putting aside how unfunny a lot of comedies are, and there always have been, but I think what I've always loved about Blake Edwards, to kind of wrap this up, and this is true of S.O.B. too, is that like the craft is impeccable. Like he's taking it seriously. Like he's everything looks great, and Henry Mancini's doing the score, and he's got a great cinematographer, and it's not showy, but like it's a real filmmaker, taking you through this.
I mean, he's coming from like the old school studio system.
Oh yeah.
And everything was top notch, and and the A game, and It's just an honorable mention. I would mention. It's not a perfect film, but Blind Date.
Blind Date.
I'm fond of.
I like Blind Date too. Blind Date is an absurd movie, but it's people don't know it was Bruce Willis's first movie. He was on Moonlighting a couple years, and it's a year before Die Hard. He makes 2 movies with Blake Edwards. He makes another movie called Sunset, which is really interesting. It's not quite a comedy, but Blind Date is Bruce Willis's first theatrical movie, at least where he's the star.
And Phil Hartman's.
Yeah, Phil Hartman. I think it's his first movie. He was on SNL already. Yeah, so 2 guys from TV. And Kim Basinger is the lead in it, and John Larroquette. A lot of guys from TV, actually, 3 of them. I'm thinking John Larroquette, Bruce Willis, and Phil Hartman were all TV stars, and they all, I guess that summer.
It's a movie that doesn't sustain, but it has its moments.
Well, yeah, Blind Date, I'd say it's like if Blake Edwards had directed After Hours, it would be Blind Date. It's
similar. It's similar to After Hours.
Yeah, like one guy going out on a date.
Linear, conventional After Hours. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a guy going on a date with a beautiful woman, and it goes wrong.
And she turns into a nightmare, and it's the date from hell,
right?
Quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean, After Hours obviously is far superior, but I do think if you were to look at if both those guys were handed the same script, or they were in the same film school class, and it was like, okay, you guys go out and do your thing, I think you'd get a very similar.
Well, After Hours is Blind Date by way of S.O.B. or something,
yeah.
Just off the rails and devoid of any conventional structure.
Right. And Rosanna Arquette is in S.O.B. and After Hours, so we got to shout that out. Young Rosanna Arquette in this. So, Dave, thank you so much for talking. I could not think of anybody else I wanted to talk about S.O.B. with when I thought of this series. This is one of the first movies I thought of, and I thought it's been so much fun to sort of cast this, and Lord of the Rings was a big assignment because we were talking about 3 movies and all these books and stuff, and you were a trooper. All right, that's our show. We have many more 1981ers to come, but next episode we're going to return to our regular hindsighting beat as Scott Frank and I discuss the best picture of 1982, Gandhi. Till then, looking forward to looking back.